Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. And yes, that is a real neighborhood. We are so proud and so very happy that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show and subscribe to the show, please, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher Radio, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Maya Smart. She's here to celebrate Reading for Our Lives, a literacy action plan from birth to 6. Before we invite Maya into the studio to speak about this incredibly important book, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Skipper, Friend or Foe, a distracting mystery within life's traumatic events. Great middle grade novel written by Kelly Sanchez. It's also a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. Michael is leading what seems to be a pretty normal life for a happy 12-year-old boy. And then the unthinkable happens. His mom gets cancer. Michael's dad has to take a job out of town because the treatments are so costly. Michael is no longer a carefree kid, but now he's his mom's caretaker. When a new friend convinces Michael to follow a mysterious adventure, Michael learns that it's not all up to him to take care of his mom, that it's okay to have fun even through some of life's toughest issues. It's a really powerful book. You want to get your copy today. Kelly Sanchez, Skipper, Friend or Foe, a distracting mystery within life's traumatic events. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Simple Words Decodable Chapter Books. From a very early age, Cheatham Kanebo's son had a passion for books. Unfortunately, reading did not come naturally to him. In 2015, at the age of 6, he was diagnosed with dyslexia. With training, he soon began reading simple words and sentences. One night, he picked up Hop on Pop by Dr. Seuss. He read the entire 160-word book over and over, and then he asked for a chapter book. Cheatham Googled, talked to experts, teachers, tutors, and parents to find low-level, high-interest books. She knew others were in search of these books too, but they didn't seem to exist. So she began to write for her son, and he began to read. And with that, Project Simple Words was born. Project Simple Words believes that the right book gives kids with dyslexia the opportunity to experience a love of reading and enjoy a chapter book without the tears. Check it out today. Go to simplewordsbooks.com. Join us right now from the beautiful city of Milwaukee in the state of Wisconsin. Our guest is here today to share with us some really important tips, I think, to help our kids become literate. She's the author of Reading for Our Lives, a literacy action plan from birth to 6. Please welcome to the show, Maya Smart. Hey, Maya, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on. Of course, the Reading with Your Kids podcast is, well, when I launched the podcast 5 years ago, I was really wanting to let families know how important it is to read with their kids. And for me, the most important thing about reading with our kids is the bond that we develop with our kids, that relationship. The conversations that I am having with my now adult kids who are 26 and 29 started when they were they started when they were in my beautiful wife, and I was reading to them, to her stomach. And I know that bond was created then, but and I knew that, you know, reading with your kids helped kids read, and I knew my kids were reading before they got to kindergarten, but I didn't realize all the other myriad of benefits the kids get from being read to, by becoming literate. Everything from developing empathy to making more money in their profession. So I'm really excited to have you on. tell us, just give us a brief overview of Reading for Our Lives, please.
Yes, Reading for Our Lives really emerged from my curiosity as a first-time mom. I was a big reader, wanted that for my daughter, and wanted more details about how to nurture reading skill and fluency and all of those wonderful things in her. So I had been told to read to her every night and have lots of books around the house and take her to the library. But I was really curious about the nuts and bolts of how reading unfolds, and also why so many children had challenges. A lot of children, even those who are read to, don't automatically pick it up. So the book emerged from that curiosity, and I ended up compiling the result of a lot of reading of academic studies and interviewing experts and years of experience volunteering with library and literacy organizations to kind of walk parents through the things that they're doing with babies and toddlers and preschoolers that support reading and more in elementary, middle, high school students and adults. Those early years really do have a long-term impact that we don't always realize.
Absolutely. One of the things that I just came across probably a week or two ago was, and it knocked me right on my butt, the statistic that there's over 130 million Americans that are not competent readers. They're not able to read fluently above a third grade level. That's a third of our nation. That just blew me away.
Yes, the statistics are really huge and startling, surprising, horrifying. Even in my book, I cite a statistic about 36 million 16 to 65-year-olds who really have below basic reading proficiency. So the inability to find information in a long text or read connected text or compare and contrast or separate fact from opinion and all these kind of skills that we would expect kids to have leaving elementary school. So many Americans don't have. And I was on CBS Mornings a couple of months ago, and they cited a statistic similar to the one you mentioned, where like more than 100 million Americans read below a sixth grade level. And these were all people who have to navigate complex contracts and, you know, even rental agreements and the ballots and elections. We need to be able to understand all of these things to function up to our potential and also contribute to society. So it's a huge issue that many people who are skilled fluent readers aren't aware of, just how many people aren't there at all and the toll that that's taking on their lives, their health, the workforce, likelihood of incarceration. It's almost everything in life literacy touches and affects.
Absolutely. You're talking about the different contracts and things. All of us, when we go on and we get an app, Facebook or whatever, we get that terms of that no one ever reads. You just scroll through and you check it, and suddenly you don't realize that TikTok now has access to every device that we own. But that's trivial compared to somebody trying to sign a rental agreement, signing a lease, understanding what they're legally committing themselves to, a job contract. It's just, I feel horrible for them and for folks who aren't able to do that. I just feel like I wish I could wrap my arms around them and just sit them down and say, look, we want to give you the help and the support that you need so that you can be safe and happy and successful. And also realizing that of that 100 million people who can't read above a sixth grade level, a huge percentage of those folks are parents.
Absolutely.
So
it becomes an intergenerational problem. So you have an adult who struggled with reading, didn't get the support they needed when they were young, spent probably 10 or more years in school, still didn't get what they needed, have graduated, have been unable to get a great job, earn a wage to fully support their family. And then this person who, without those literacy skills, is then now tasked with trying to support their child and getting something they never got. So it really is a major challenge that more people should be paying attention to so that we can all use this knowledge to advocate for better reading curriculum, support within schools, tutoring, interventions for kids who need it, but also recognizing that it really is a family issue and we have to support people to do what they can do regardless of their literacy level to support their child.
Yeah.
So even a parent who's not a super reader can have conversations with their child and those back and forth exchanges and build their vocabulary through talking about things in their environment. They can teach the child the letters they do know. So it's sort of like in the early years, my book focuses on birth to 6. Mm-hmm. There are so many positive literacy promoting things that parents can do that don't require them being strong readers themselves.
Great.
So,
well, I definitely, first, let's do the basics and talk about what a typical parent can do. But I do absolutely want to spend a lot of time talking about what parents who struggle with reading can do. So first, what should we all be doing with our kids from birth to 6?
Definitely from the moment you bring them home from the hospital, start speaking to them using real words and sentences and getting in that habit of treating their vocalizations, their coos, their babbles as conversation and responding. Because some people think, why should I talk to a baby? They can't understand me. They can't respond. But you're doing it so that they one day have the vocabulary to respond. Mm-hmm. And we know it's not like just one day they automatically everything clicks and they get it. They get it through the process of being spoken to and their own attempts at communication. So that's one thing. Just recognize as parents that there's a strong connection between language development, oral language development, and their ability to speak and understand you. There's a strong connection between that and literacy down the road. All the words that they'll recognize in print when they're beginning as readers are words that they understand from conversation, or else it doesn't make sense what they've sounded out. So from day one, talk and make sure it's back and forth, duet. Also, parents as they get older, and I also advocate reading from day one, again, to establish that habit for yourself mm-hmm. as a parent to think consciously about building that library, but also tailor the books that you're selecting to their age. So definitely, if they're little, get the board book so they can have that sensory experience of turning the pages themselves. Even if they're batting at the book and trying to chew on it, all of that engagement and book behavior is a part of learning and a part of their development. So talking, book reading, and then there comes a point where you actually can begin to teach mm-hmm. as a parent these important lessons about print. We forget kids have to learn that text runs from left to right on the page, from top to bottom on the page, and simply dragging your finger along the text as you read helps teach that lesson. And then parents can also talk about letters, that letters are made of lines, dots, and curves, and help kids distinguish letters from numbers and letters from other drawings or things they might encounter on paper. So I definitely advocate those 3 things for sure, to teach what we can. Yeah.
And, one of the themes that I really pushed at the beginning of the podcast 5 years ago, and I definitely I'm being more mindful to make sure that we push it again. Parents, it doesn't matter what level of education you have, you are your child's first and most important teacher. What Maya is telling us right now, sitting down, spending that time with your newborn, reading the books, letting them play with the books, letting them chew on the books, running your finger across the words, teaching them how our words go. So very, very important.
And what you're saying reminds me of many parents mistakenly believe that technology can teach the youngest children, but there's no technology that's as responsive to your child and their interests as you are. Only you are in that room to see where they're looking, what they're interested in, or what they're gesturing toward, or what they're trying to articulate. So it's really important for parents to feel confident mm-hmm. that you are, as you said, their first and best teacher, and you can't play that position.
Now, one of the things, again, when we launched the podcast, I sat down with my beautiful wife who just retired from the Boston Public Schools as a special needs teacher, and her best friend who was a principal in that system. And I said, how can we get the parents that you're working with to read more with their kids? And they brought up the subjects that we touched on early on. My wife and her friend told me a lot of our parents are working 3 jobs. They don't speak English fluently or at all. They don't read. They don't have access to books. How can we support them, and how can we let them know that they can still play a huge part in their kids becoming literate?
One, it's just being just a positive, supportive voice for parents. So when you encounter a parent of young children, it could be in your neighborhood, your church, your workplace, wherever, smile and give them some positive, encouraging words about how important they are in their child's life. Share what you know about all the brain development that happens between birth and 3 and why it's so important that they have those nurturing back and forth exchanges. And explain that when you're talking to your child and labeling and pointing and describing things in your immediate environment and also in books, that you really are building their vocabulary. And it's good to tell parents that teaching doesn't have to look the way they remember it from school. When you're with your child, it can be more natural, more playful, more fun, and just more integrated into everyday life. So wordplay, singing nursery rhymes, rhyming games, all of those things also important for helping kids discern the sounds within words, which is an important part of learning to read as well. And to remind parents that it's critical prior to the school year for kids to start to have that familiarity with print and to start learning letters. And most parents, even if they aren't great readers, know letters, some letters, and can point to them on signage or the cereal box or write one on a piece of paper and just make letters a topic of conversation as well, just to get kids interested and aware of print. And it makes such a big difference when they get to kindergarten, the number of letters that they know and can recognize and name.
Yeah. One of the things that we've advocated here on the podcast is for parents, all parents, whether they can read or not, to take picture walks through a book with their kids. Just don't worry about the words. Cover the text, if your kids are able to read, and just go for a walk through a book and talk about the pictures and what they think is going on in the story. Can you talk a little bit more about what the benefit of that could be?
I think the benefit is around vocabulary. The benefit is around building that relationship, and it's around conversation, asking questions about the pictures and what do you think is going to happen next, and why is this occurring in this way, or when do you think blah, blah, blah. All of those questions, anytime you ask a child a question and pause and wait for a response, you're stimulating their thought and engagement, and giving them the opportunity to express themselves and their vocabulary. So I think, again, it points to that dynamic exchange. It's not always about the book. It's about the relationship and the conversation around the book.
Yeah. One of the things that I've said here on the podcast, and I'm just a dopey guy with a podcast who raised a couple of kids. I don't have the credentials that you have, but I've always said that when you're asking a kid a question, when you're asking them, what do you think? What do you think is going on? What do you think will happen next? What should have happened? You're empowering kids because you're the most important person in your kid's life, and you're saying to them, I'm interested in what you think. Am I just talking out of my hat, or is there something to back that up?
Powerful. I think that is very true, that you are paying that attention to your child and you're validating that their response and their thoughts and their ideas are important. So I think it's another wonderful dimension of these kinds of exchanges, for sure.
Yeah. Hey, one of the challenges that I did not have when my kids were young, and I think I might struggle with it if I was a dad today, is this thing. The temptation as I'm reading a book with my kid, or as I'm listening to my kid read the book when they start to become independent readers, I would have a hard time not picking up the phone and dividing my attention. That, I think, is probably really important for us to do. Put down technology. When you're spending time reading with your kid, let that be the focus.
Yes, there's definitely... We're rewiring our brains, or at least our habits, to want kind of this immediate gratification. So sometimes it comes up innocently, picking up the phone. You'll be in conversation with a child and they'll ask, where do clouds come from, or whatever question they merge, and you reach for your phone to Google an answer because you want to deliver that answer. But then you've brought this technology into it and you're gone off in a tangent and your attention is divided. But just generally speaking, we are modeling the behavior around technology. And so kids, once they have access to phones and tablets, will pick them up just as much, if not more, than what we do. So even in the book, I mentioned just the mindfulness habit of when you see yourself reaching for your phone for whatever reason, kind of pause, take a few breaths, deep breaths, and ask yourself, do you even really need it? Because sometimes just that pause is enough to get you to redirect your attention back to the conversation, back to the book, back to whatever that important exchange with your child face to face in real time is.
Yeah. One of the things that one of our past guests brought up on the show, when LeVar Burton was on the podcast, I asked him what inspired his passion for literacy. And it was, I just remember it so well. He just laughed and he said, my mom. Seeing my mom with a book or a magazine or newspaper all the time just let me know how important reading was.
Yes, the parent modeling is hugely important. It's also important for parents to add a teaching element to that, because the reality is in our schools that most kids are not getting the reading instruction they need to really thrive. So part of my message in the book is absolutely be a reader yourself, have books around, demonstrate to your child how important reading is for you practically to navigate your life and succeed and thrive in your career and daily life, how much pleasure you get out of reading literature or magazines or whatever else you're reading, and also do what you can to build a strong foundation for reading by teaching about the letters, by helping them build phonemic awareness and all the other things we've talked about. So I feel like it's both. We have to model, and the reality is we have to teach.
Yeah. I'll ask you the same question. Where does your passion for reading and literacy come from?
I have been a reader as long as I can remember and just have loved it. My parents named me Maya after Maya Angelou. And then my husband and I in turn named our daughter after Zora Neale Hurston, another African-American novelist and writer. But my dad tells a story. I didn't remember being taught to read, and I didn't remember my parents reading to me. And my dad said that when I was very young, I would get really frustrated when they would read to me. I wanted to do it myself. And so at some point I was taught in preschool, or who knows, somehow I was taught, and then I just took off. And ever since, I'm always reading one or more books. So, yeah, I just love it. I'm by nature kind of introverted and just enjoy that time with a book, just sharing these other worlds. And I find that I prefer learning things from reading. I know a lot of people now turn to YouTube for videos to demonstrate certain things. I'll always pick up a book first because there's something about just that immersion in the pages that I personally enjoy. Yeah. And to your earlier, there are just kind of the social emotional benefits of it. You can have a hectic day and then sink into a book. You can be feeling like unmotivated and you pick up a different kind of book and suddenly you're inspired to seize the day. So I read for all of those reasons. Yeah.
And one last thing, we're recording this in the day after the 2022 elections, and we've heard for months, we've heard all this arguing about this issue and that issue. One of the things I don't hear politicians talking about is this idea of literacy and addressing the fact that not only are 100 million Americans out there who aren't able to read competently, but I'm guessing most of them graduated from high school. And that is something, we're not going to solve that here in the podcast, but I definitely think that is something that we as a nation, as a society, need to address. Is, we're spending huge amounts of money. Some people say not enough money, but we are spending a huge amount of money on our education system, and it's failing too many kids.
It absolutely is. I wrote an op-ed for Time about this because there have been a lot of debates within education about different reading curriculum and what we need to do within schools. And it's my belief that we have to take a larger view of literacy and understand how important the years prior to school are for getting kids ready for school and learning and having the brain connections and function they need to do the things that schools expect of them. And so I really think the debate needs to move beyond education. Employers need to recognize that it's a workforce development issue. Who is going to work for these businesses and companies if there are tens of millions of illiterate people? And think also about your current workforce and how well supported their families are. Are they able to enroll their kids in high quality childcare and education programs? Are they provided with paid parental leave to spend time with their children after they've had them and had those conversations and lay the foundation for a healthy family life? So there are so many issues there are so many things that affect a child's ability to learn to read that are in play before they ever get to school. And any kindergarten teacher will tell you about just the range of skills that kids enter with, particularly after COVID.
Yeah. You know, I think it's fascinating and really powerful and, to be honest with you, pretty courageous to be able to say that the answer isn't taking our kids away from their parents and putting them into some kind of structured educational facility at a younger and younger age. The answer is supporting families so that they can be working with their own kids at home, developing these skills.
I think it's both. I think that we don't do anything at all to educate as a society, to educate parents about how to nurture children's brain development. And there's like just overwhelming research that early experiences, particularly adverse, traumatic, negative experiences like poverty and discrimination and homelessness and all these other things, have a lifelong impact in the developing brains of children, but also in other physical systems. It's like the body carries the trauma over time, and it's manifesting in hypertension and heart disease and diabetes and all these things. So we can't have millions of kids in impoverished, traumatic, early childhood circumstances and expect them to thrive, even if we have the best trained teachers and best reading curriculum. And we just have to think about nurturing families and also providing affordable access to childcare at whatever point kids enter school, high school.
Yeah. You know, I do educational magic shows around the country, and you've answered this in a number of different ways, but oftentimes I'll ask a teacher who's written a book, who's come on, if this were a magic wand and I were to hand it to you and I said, hey, just take this magic wand and wave it, what would education look like after you waved your magic wand?
After I waved my magic wand, education would start with educating the parent, even prior to them having the child, about the critical role they play as that first and best teacher that you mentioned. So that the parent could then do all that they could through conversation and nurturing and nutrition in their homes, and to lay a strong foundation and start helping the child grow and learn in those years before school. And also so that that parent would understand what a quality school looks like, what quality reading instruction looks like, what quality intervention and tutoring support looks like for the percentage of kids who need extra support, so that parents could then become advocates for their own children, but for all children. Because it's like we need more and more voices saying the way that we have done this doesn't work. We have decades of the National Assessment of Education progress reports showing that most kids by fourth grade are reading at a below proficient level. That's most kids. And it's particularly bad among poor children. It's particularly bad among Black and Hispanic students, but it's bad among all students. So it's not a matter, and it's worse after COVID. The latest report came out a couple weeks ago. So it's not a matter of like reclaiming some golden age when we did reading instruction and reading development better. It's a matter of doing something completely different to say we really are committed to mass literacy, to a society where people exit high school with the skills they need to read a ballot and understand their apartment lease and all the other things we've talked about. So it really is a matter of doing something differently. And for me, that starts prior to the birth of kids, educating that parent and setting them on a track to support their own child and advocate for the broader changes that are needed for all children to thrive.
Let's Let's make that happen. There are first-time home buyer seminars out there, and there are all these other things that are preparing people to do different tasks, but we're not preparing parents to be parents to help their kids read. When you start waving that magic wand to make that happen, you let me know, because I want to support you, and I want to see that happen.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and share these ideas.
Tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Reading for Our Lives, a literacy action plan from birth to 6, and more about all the great things you're doing.
My website, mayasmart.com, that's MAYASMART.com, publishes free book lists and family literacy activities every week. And then at mayasmart.com/book, there are links to find the book at the retailer of your choice.
We've had a really powerful time speaking to the author of Reading for Our Lives, a literacy action plan from birth to 6. And our guest has been Maya Smart. Maya, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Anna Rose Johnson. She'll be here to celebrate The Star That Always Stays, a debut middle grade novel from our guest. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we'll start by thanking our guest, Maya Smart. Please be sure to check her website. I also want to thank our sponsors, Kelly Sanchez. Be sure to check out her certified great read middle grade novel. It's called Skipper, Friend or Foe, Distracting Mystery Within Life's Traumatic Event. We also want to thank the folks over at Simple Words Decodable Chapter Books. You can find out all about it at simplewordsbooks.com. I want to thank my amazing team, Rory Brady, Fatima Khan, Jordan Saley, Mirabella Q, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.